Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the NSF GRFP workshop series. We'll give folks just a minute or two to hop on. All right, well, without further ado, I'm going to turn this session over to Dr. Lauren Kuryloski. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yep, Kuryloski, sounds good.
Dr. Kuryloski is from the Department of Engineering Education and is here to talk to us about technical communication. So yesterday you heard from Dr. Rhonda Reed about the personal statement writing portion, which is that 3-page past research and future goals. But then you have the research statement, and that is more technical, but I think you'll hear a little bit about how this comes into play even in your personal statement. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. We can get started. So I'll start with just a quick overview of what I hope to cover in the time that we have. A very brief review of those required statements that Elizabeth was just talking about. Then we'll spend most of our time discussing some of the foundational concepts associated with really effective communication in general, but specifically effective technical communication. We'll think about those concepts, many of which I'm sure everyone is familiar with, but we'll kind of review those and we'll think about what they look like in action. And then we'll break up some of that definitional work with a few examples. And then at the end, we'll save some time to just kind of recap what we've talked about and then open it up to questions if there are any. So to start with, a review of those required statements, the personal statement and the research plan, and we'll work through this pretty quickly. You already have, hopefully you're very familiar with both of these by now and that you've read them closely. It sounds like you just had a session about the personal statement. So I won't say much more about this beyond whether you are working on this particular application or any other application in the future, grad school, something else. One of my primary pieces of advice would just be to read whatever instructions or whatever prompt is provided to you as closely as possible. You really want to know what those readers are asking of you and then really deliver that to them in whatever form that they want. You're always trying to make your reader's life easier, and so carefully reading those instructions or that prompt will help you do that. I want to spend just a little bit more time with the research statement because this is probably where you'll be doing most of the technical writing because it's where you're actually talking about your research and the kinds of technical work that you are doing. So a few things I wanted to point out specifically here. Even in this short piece, when I did my close reading, a few things really stood out as being of importance. And the first is the kind of repeated emphasis on the importance of communication and the ability to effectively communicate your ideas to readers. So we see that word coming up at least twice. And so I would say that any application, especially an application like this, can seem kind of daunting. I know a lot of people whose strengths really lie in the technical aspects of their work sometimes feel as though they are not as talented at the writing component, or that can be a little nerve-wracking. But I would say really look at this as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to communicate the work that you're doing in ways that are clear, interesting, and exciting to the reader. And it really is, in many ways, a kind of persuasive document. You're trying to sell them on the importance of your research and the larger impact it stands to make. So it's really an opportunity in terms of what you are able to communicate or get across in the statement. The other thing that I want to point out is the importance of clarity. So in a moment, when we turn to the foundational concepts associated with effective technical communication, clarity is going to be one of the first things that we talk about, and we see some version of that several times, even in this very short overview. So clear or clearly is used 3 different times. If we're being clear, it means that we are articulating a concept in a way that our readers are going to understand, and hopefully in a way that they're going to care about. And part of that is avoiding excessive use of jargon. And we see that very explicitly outlined here as part of the overview of what they want in your application. Your readers may not be in your field, and even if they are in your field, it is unlikely that they will be experts in the exact same field or subgenre that you are an expert in. And so I understand that often in a document like this, we want to sound really smart. We want to show that we are aware of the terminology or perhaps the jargon in our fields. And if you're talking to other niche specialists, jargon can be really great. For everyone else, it's often a hindrance. It just makes it harder to understand what you're talking about, which is the exact opposite of clarity. It's the exact opposite of what we want. So we want to make sure that we're doing the important translation work, if you will, to get your ideas across. And the final thing that I'll point out here is the idea that in an application like this, or when we're talking about technical writing, we often think about the written word, like at the sentence level, what should we be saying or doing? But a critical component of effective technical communication is design. And so design is either going to help us communicate those ideas or it's going to hinder us in that process. And of course, we want it to help. And so one of the last things that this overview says is to address intellectual merit and broader impacts under separate headings. That suggests to me that we should also be thinking about the design and the presentation of your application materials in addition to the words that you are actually using. So effective design, effective use of headings is going to make it easier for readers to identify that information that they're looking for. And when they might be reading through a stack of applications, again, you want to ensure that you are making their reading experience easier. And so following the instructions and presenting the material in a way that is easy to navigate is going to help you do that. So having that serve as a framework for our larger conversation, let's move into the foundational concepts. And we'll start with 3. We'll look at an example. We'll have another 3, and we'll go from there. So the first concept that I want to talk about is clarity, like we addressed a moment ago. When we're talking about clarity, a piece of writing is clear if all of the information is easy to understand and appropriate for that given audience. If we're writing to a lay audience or even just a more generalized technical audience, we want to make sure that terms that are specific to our work or our projects are defined in a way that anyone would understand. Another component of clarity is ensuring that all the necessary contextual information has been provided. And so are we giving people enough to make sense of what we're talking about? Another part of this is really just defining some of the pronouns that we use. So if we're talking about it, right, in our work, it is really important that, so on and so forth. We want to make sure that the it is defined. What is it that we're talking about? We don't want to make any assumptions that our reader automatically knows what we're talking about. We want to really clearly articulate that for them. We can also think about some barriers to clarity, like what goes wrong in our writing. And these are things that happens to everyone. And so it's helpful to be aware of it so that we can then avoid it. That field-specific jargon that we've been talking about. Also the use of long, overly complex or academic sentences. So again, everyone wants to sound really smart in their application materials. You want to convey that you have a certain mastery over the subject that you're talking about. However, if every sentence is really long, it's really complex, it's got a lot of maybe what we would consider to be academic language, that slows down that reading process. It often gets in the way of that reading process. And so we want to sound smart, but we also want to sound clear. And clearly we want to avoid vague statements, those things that are left undefined or unsaid. Another concept that will be important is accuracy. And so a component of accuracy is just being ethical. So all the information that you are providing, of course, should be truthful. And we really want to take care that the information is not presented in a way that could be easily misinterpreted or misunderstood. Another component here is that the information we provide should be comprehensive, giving the reader everything that they would need to know. And here we can kind of see how a lot of these concepts overlap. So providing contextual information, making sure that something's comprehensive, we can see the way accuracy and clarity work hand in hand. So a barrier to accuracy would, of course, be unethical things like trying to inflate the results of a study or experiment. Of course, we don't want to do that. Providing misleading statistics or numbers, or even just kind of having some missing information, forgetting some information that someone might need in order to make sense of what we're discussing. And our third concept here is conciseness or concision. And that's the idea that we're trying to convey complex ideas in as few words as possible, which means that we're focusing only on what's necessary for the reader to make sense of the concept. And I was just talking about how a lot of these concepts overlap. We can also think about the way in which they have to be held in a certain kind of balance. So yes, we want the statement to be comprehensive. It's giving someone everything that they would need to know. Yet there's also a limit. We want the text to be concise. We can't say everything that we might want to say. And so it's a process of figuring out what information is truly necessary, what can we cut, and sometimes that cutting actually just happens at the sentence level. We want every word in a sentence to serve a purpose. I'm sure you've probably heard of like fluff in writing before. We want to cut the fluff so that we have more space to talk about those concepts that are really important. And some barriers to conciseness or concision are feeling that need to convey or to include every single detail rather than those that are just most interesting or relevant, and general wordiness. So I think it might be a good time to move into an example. I have a short piece here, and so bear with me as I read it, and then we'll talk about it. There's currently a lively and rigorous debate among many biomedical engineers and other professionals who work in healthcare-related fields. In reviewing the existing literature, one quite often happens upon competing definitions of biocompatibility, despite the existence of ISO 10993, which itself is preceded by the tripartite agreement. A recent survey found that nearly a full 17% of engineers disputed evaluative criteria for determining biocompatibility risk in terms of material-mediated pyrogenicity. So probably just hearing me read it, you've got the sense that that is a bit of a mouthful. It feels kind of jargony, and you can probably already identify some places where it's just wordy. It's not as concise as we would want it to be. So in terms of clarity, conciseness, accuracy, I think we have a few problems here. And so let's maybe pinpoint exactly where those problems are occurring, and then we'll think about how to solve them. So we're right at the very beginning. There's currently lively and rigorous debate. We have 3 words to describe debate. That is probably too many. That's a conciseness issue. I would argue that a debate is probably inherently lively or rigorous. So I don't know that we need either of those words. We definitely don't need both. As we move a little further on in that opening sentence, we have kind of our subject here: biomedical engineers and other professionals who work in healthcare-related fields. So again, we sort of have a conciseness issue. It's sort of long, it's a mouthful. I also think it's a problem in terms of clarity. Who really is the subject of this sentence and really of this passage, right? Who is this debate taking place among? Definitely biomedical engineers, but is it true that this debate about material-mediated pyrogenicity also takes place amongst all other people who might work in healthcare-related fields? Someone who works in medical billing, for instance, probably is not engaged in this debate in the same way that these biomedical engineers are. So the wordier it gets, the more unclear it gets, the harder it is to figure out what our true focus is. Moving forward, they talk about reviewing the existing literature. I think this is actually a moment where we might say, is there an accuracy problem happening here? What body of literature is being reviewed? Another way to think about this is to consider the relationship between claims and evidence. Anytime we make a claim, we want to support it with concrete pieces of evidence. Right here, they are suggesting that this body of literature exists. They're not really giving us anything to work with. Moving forward, so when we review this literature, one quite often happens upon these competing definitions. That's another conciseness moment here. A few moments ago, we talked about sentences that are kind of overly academic sounding. The language here, one quite often happens upon, sounds overly formal. One of the problems with this kind of needlessly formal language is that it usually requires more words to get a simple point across. So we might bookmark this as a moment to come back to and think about how we can just streamline that language. Then we get into a few different pieces where I think we run into that problem with field-specific jargon. So we've got the ISO 10993 with no real explanation of what that is, a kind of aside about this tripartite agreement, and then ending with this material-mediated pyrogenicity term or concept with no clear definition. If this author here were writing to other people in their exact field or area of specialization, all of this might make sense. For a more generalized audience, I think it would cause some challenges. It would be hard to figure out what exactly it is that we're talking about. And one of the last things I'll point out here is this moment where they cite a survey and say that nearly a full 17% of engineers disputed this evaluative criteria. That's another moment where I wonder about the accuracy of this statement, because their language really makes it sound as though this is a really shocking number, a full 17%. And yet the numerical value 17 doesn't inherently sound that large. And so without knowing how many people were involved in that survey, I don't know if this claim is very accurate or if it might be a little inflated because they're trying to drive home a certain point. So hopefully we can see that even in a really short passage like this, we have a lot of problems in terms of clarity, conciseness, and accuracy. And so before we go on to the next slide, I'll just kind of, point out that our total word count here is 71. And so now let's think about what a better version might sound like. Here's our revised example. Current literature suggests that biomedical engineers still struggle to define biocompatibility. Although the ISO 10993 establishes a set of standards for the field, a recent survey of 750 engineers found that 17% of respondents challenged the existing evaluative framework for determining biocompatibility risk for material-mediated pyrogenicity, which occurs when a non-biological substance causes a fever-inducing response. So I want to point out a few things about this revision. Hopefully, some of the changes here and their benefits are immediate. I think it feels a little less cumbersome to say. Hopefully, it feels a little less cumbersome to read. And I want to point out that I did manage to winnow it down a little bit. We went from 71 words to 66. So I definitely made it more concise, even though there's not a huge difference in the final word count. But I think it's so much more robust in terms of the information that it's able to convey in fewer words. And the takeaway point here is that when you're working on application materials like the NSF GRFP, you've got a limited amount of space. It's hard to say everything that you want to say. And when the time comes that you may have to edit and cut down that content, writers often get really nervous about feeling as though they have to cut ideas in order to make a word count or a page count. And often what you really need to do is just cut excess words. And so in this piece, we can think about what that looked like. So now we have clearly defined our subject is just biomedical engineers. I'm no longer concerned with everybody else who works in healthcare. I've cut that down. I've cut down some of the information about the tripartite agreement, which really just seemed like a kind of addition or aside in that first version. So I took away some things that seemed unnecessary, and I managed to put in a lot of information that's actually helpful. So now we're not just talking about sort of generalized bodies of information or literature. I've included citations. I've given some numbers for the amount or number of engineers that were surveyed. So now that 17% number is a little more meaningful. And I've managed to add a definition for that material-mediated pyrogenicity. So a kind of takeaway point here is you're, again, always trying to strike a balance between conciseness and accuracy. We want to cut the fluff, but in order to be accurate, we want to make sure that the important details are there. So let's think about three more concepts, and then we'll have another example and kind of move towards the end or the second half here. The next concept that I want to talk about is readability. If a text is readable, it means it's easy to understand on the first read through. And so you've definitely read texts that are readable, and you've read texts that are not readable. When you have to look at a sentence 2 or 3 times to figure out what is it that they're exactly trying to say here, that text is struggling with readability. There are a few things that we can do to try to ensure that our writing is readable. And that is, one would be at the sentence level, make sure that we're writing in the active voice. And so if we're writing in the active voice, it means our sentences follow this pattern. The subject, which is the person or thing doing something, it's the actor in the sentence, comes at the beginning of the sentence or as close to the beginning as possible. And that is followed by the verb, so the thing that they are doing. The chicken, subject, crossed, verb, the road. At the paragraph level, it means that each paragraph has one main idea, and that main idea is announced by a topic sentence. So the first sentence of each paragraph should tell me, here's what we are talking about right now. Some barriers to readability are the passive voice. That's when that subject gets moved out of the subject position at the beginning of the sentence. The road was crossed by the chicken. The chicken is now way at the end of the sentence. It's separated from the verb, and the road, which is inactive, it can only be acted upon, is for some reason in our subject position. Passive voice creates a couple different problems. One, you will often find that when you are writing in the passive voice, it takes more words to convey your idea than if you were writing in the active voice. So kind of wordiness issue again. And the other issue is that the more complex the sentence gets, the passive voice makes it harder to figure out who our actual subject is, who or what is the focus of our attention or is acting in the sentence. Another barrier to readability is the lack of sentence variation. If every single sentence is very short and direct, it comes across as choppy and sort of unsophisticated. But as we've already talked about, if every sentence is really long and complex, that's really labor intensive to read, and it can often make it hard to follow our train of thought. So ideally, we will have some variation in terms of sentence length and structure. And then finally, a barrier to readability is paragraphs that just try to tackle too many subjects. If you are writing and you see that your paragraph is stretched over a half a page, that's usually a good tip-off that you are trying to talk about too many things in one section. So give each of your main thoughts its own paragraph and the space to expand upon those ideas. Usability is an important component of effective technical communication. If a text is usable, it allows the reader or the user of that document to do whatever it is that they need or want to do. And so in writing, a usable text will include action items. Here's what I want you to do. Here's what you need in order to do it. Here's a deadline for doing it, and any relevant information that would be helpful. Here's where design also comes into play. Design is often a key usability feature of a given text. And so we want the document's design to aid in that reading process. Often that happens through the effective use of headings, clear descriptive headings that announce a main idea, through the strategic use of typography. And by typography, I'm really just talking about font. What font style are we using? What size is that font? Are we making use of things like bolding, italics, underlining, capitalization, things like that? And are we effectively using white space? So there's two kinds of white space. One is passive space, and that is our marginal space, that space on the top and bottom and the left and right-hand side of the page. There's also active space. That's the space in the middle of a document, like the space between these terms that I have here. And we do want some white space in a document. I'm sure you've all seen the kind of wall of text, pieces of writing. That's not really engaging. It's not inviting. And it also makes it really hard to skim that text to kind of quickly identify important pieces of information. So barriers to usability would be a lack of concrete details or action items. You can see the way in this is related to things like clarity and accuracy, comprehensiveness. that wall of text without any differentiation between parts. And our last concept here is correctness. When we're talking about correctness, we really mean that a text follows the rules. And that can be the rules of grammar, of syntax. If you are using a particular citation style, the rules of that citation style, generic convention. And when I say generic convention, I just mean it's following the rules of a given genre. So a letter looks like, is formatted like, and does the work of a letter, which is different than a memo, which is different than this research statement that you are working on for the NSF GRFP. And barriers to correctness are just running out of time to do that important proofreading and revision work. I know that it's hard. We're often writing until the very last minute. If at all possible, I would say get a draft out and give yourself some time to step away from it and then to return to it with a fresh set of eyes, because that's really going to help in that proofreading and revision process. And then, of course, just unfamiliarity with the given rules of, let's say, grammar or punctuation or citation style. And the good thing here is that there are no shortage of resources for you. So plenty of people that you could talk to on campus, or just plenty of information that you can find online that will often help you navigate some of these challenges. So here is our next example. And as you can see, it's a little bit longer than the first piece. So I've been talking at you for a while now. I'm not going to read this one out loud. I'll give everybody a minute or so to read through it, even just do a decent skim and think about the ways in which it is failing to demonstrate readability, usability, and correctness. So I'll give everyone like a minute or so, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, even if you haven't read every word here, I'm sure some of the issues in the piece are obvious. And so I'm going to just work through this in terms of the three concepts here. The first thing that stands out to me is a big usability issue. And that is just that we are faced with that wall of text. So especially, I only gave you a little bit of time to read through this. I think it's hard. It's a hard piece to skim. You probably have some sense of the main idea, but I think some strategic design changes would probably make it much easier to look at this and immediately understand, okay, what is it that we're talking about? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And so we will want to implement some usability changes here, specifically in terms of how just visually the information is presented. I was saying a moment ago that when we have that wall of text, when we have a really long paragraph, often there are multiple ideas buried in that paragraph. And so part of the work that we want to do is look for, where's a natural paragraph break? Where does the author move from idea A to idea B to idea C? And often people kind of embed prototopic sentences into the text, even though they don't realize it. And I think that is the case here. So I'm just going to point out what I think are the three main ideas, and when the author could start a new paragraph or a new section. And so the first thing they mention is that PPE is crucial to keeping the number of cases low. Now, as a starting point, this could be better. It could be a stronger topic sentence, because it isn't until the second sentence that we actually understand the main idea here, the number of what cases. We're talking about trying to reduce the number of COVID-19 infections in a nursing home. So we could make that topic sentence stronger, but the first main idea is there, that one way we do that is through sufficient PPE. About halfway through, they mentioned that frequent testing can be expensive, but maintaining testing capacity is another essential to preventing further outbreaks. So, okay, PPE is important to reduce the number of cases, as is frequent testing. That's our second idea. And then we move into the third idea, or that third pivot here in this piece of writing. Resident transfers can spread the virus as well. So that seems like a third idea. So 3 different places where we might start a new paragraph or create a new section. And then I think we could do a little additional work on these topic sentences. Ideally, we want our piece of writing to feel like it's cohesive, that each idea builds upon the other in a way that is meaningful and logical. And I think the author's struggling with that a little bit here, because what they first start talking about are solutions to a problem or strategies that could be implemented. By the time we get to their second main idea, we still have a strategy or a solution, right? We need testing, but they're kind of building in a challenge or a hurdle. This is expensive. And by the time they get to the third idea, they have fully transitioned into talking about challenges or problems, right? Transfers spread the virus. So I would recommend figure out what's the main idea here. Are we talking about solutions to a problem? Are we talking about strategies that might be implemented? Or are we talking about challenges that we're facing? And then revise those topic sentences so that they are all parallel with one another, or that they're all in alignment and making the same larger point. That's going to make the piece feel just more cohesive. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. I also want to point out that we have some of that passive voice here. And so right here, they're citing one of their sources, and they say, as stated by Gurwitz. That's the passive voice. Active voice would be to start with our subject, Gurwitz, followed by the verb, states. And you can see here that that is shorter than the version that they have in the current piece of writing, because that passive voice often necessitates more words rather than fewer. And now we can think about a few correctness issues. And so the first thing that stands out to me here is just like a punctuation problem. A Baltimore nursing home gave all of their residents masks. They have a singular possessive here with the apostrophe S, but this is not a case of possession. We're just talking about multiple residents being given masks, and so we don't need that. We also have a few different problems with their approach to citation, in that it is very inconsistent. So we have a couple different authors that are cited in this piece. For Roderick's, we have a date, but none of the other, on Gurwitz, we have a date, but for some of our others, we do not. One citation, that Gurwitz citation, gets a page number, the others do not. And when we get here to the end, we have a direct quote from someone, but we don't know who, because we don't have an author, a date, or a page number. So whatever citation style you were using, I would say first, check with your audience, your reader. Is there some kind of citation style that they are asking for? If there is, use that style, familiarize yourself with those rules and use it. And if they haven't specified a citation style, pick one that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with, and remain consistent, because these little correctness issues over time will really stand out and detract from the professionalism of the piece. And one of the final things here is at the end, we actually do have a case of possession. We're talking about the resident's needs. And so we would want the plural possessive S apostrophe. And it's little things like this, which is why you really want to devote the time or have the time to proofread, to go through your final document with that fine-tooth comb, or to hand it off to someone else who can help you catch those kinds of things. I will add one bonus concept here that we haven't talked about yet, and that is the concept of precision. Precision is definitely related to clarity and accuracy. I really think of precision as choosing the best possible word to describe a given situation. And we have, I think, a precision issue here when they talk about resident transfers can help spread the virus. Help usually has a positive connotation. It's good to help someone do something. In this case, spreading the virus is obviously negative. So I wonder if it is the most precise use of language, if there's other ways we could be talking about the problem or the potential solution. So here's what a revised version might look like. And I'm not going to read this word for word, and I don't think we need to pause on it for a very long time because some of the changes I hope are pretty obvious. And so one of those is just the use of typography and white space to make a much more easily navigable document. So I've given it a clear title. And that title is in all caps. And so the main idea is immediately identifiable from the very first read, right? There's no way that we would skim this and not walk away with the main idea. And then descending from there, there's a relationship between the information hierarchy and the visual hierarchy. Our three main ideas are announced by a descriptive header. That header is in bold, it's indented. And so again, you could very quickly look at this and realize, okay, we are talking about strategies for preventing these outbreaks. And here's strategy 1, 2, and 3. And I have decided to make the executive decision that what we are talking about here is not challenges or a mix of challenges and opportunities, but rather strategies, right? Here's a problem, and here are 3 approaches to solving that problem. And so that creates a feeling of cohesion, that all of these points are building upon one another, and that we can walk away with a clear sense of the main idea. And hopefully that just looking at this, it's a little more inviting than the piece we just looked at. And I should also point out that I tried to resolve some of those citation issues. In this piece, I've decided I don't need page numbers, but every author gets the year of publication. So moving to the end of our conversation now, I started this discussion by saying that the design of a piece really plays an integral role in effective technical communication. We were just talking about that a moment ago, but we can think also a little bit in addition to the presentation of the written word, right, the presentation of text, we can think about the role of visuals as well. Visuals are often a key usability feature in a text. They work to engage the reader. They're interesting. They're an alternative to that wall of text. And they can also make complex information easier to understand. I can imagine in the statements that you're working on, visuals might do any number of things. So you might be showing your data in tables or graphs. You could be mapping out your research plan in the form of a timeline or a flow chart, or just articulating the need for your project through a useful illustration or perhaps even an infographic. A couple things to note here. Visuals are often helpful as long as they are doing the following kinds of things. Visuals need contextual information. They need a label and a title. What's the difference between those two things? A label is something like Figure 1, Figure 2. The title is an actual description of what the image shows us. If we're working on a graph, you also need axis labels. So labels for that X and Y axis. Even if you think it's really obvious, what are we measuring and how is it being measured? You want to have that information there because, again, we don't want to assume anything on the part of our readers. We want the graph to be comprehensive, and a graph that does not have axis labels is just not correct, to use another term that we talked about. We also want there to be a clear relationship between the written text and the visual. So the written text should introduce that visual. It should say something like, see Figure 1, and then hopefully Figure 1 is located near that textual reference. So we're not talking about Figure 1 on page 1, but not actually getting around to seeing Figure 1 until page 2. We don't want to again, we're trying to make this easy for our readers, so we don't want to force them to do a lot of flipping through pages or a lot of extraneous scrolling. Put those two pieces close together so that they can be in conversation with one another. So as a way to end, I just wanted to pull one more example. And so this is an example of a successful NSF GRFP research statement from a few years ago. And I think it illustrates some of those concepts that we've been talking about. So right off the start, we can see how typography is being used as a usability feature. We've got that title. It is the most important piece of information, or certainly it announces the main idea. And so it's in bold, it's in caps. That is supplemented by a section for keywords. I actually think this is really useful and that it helps to clarify the title and underscore those main concepts. So the title alone, Integrating Connected Pedestrians in Intelligent Intersection Control Systems, I might have a sense of what they're talking about, but it could be a little jargony. But the first keyword I see is automated vehicle. So now that really situates me in a larger discourse, in a larger field of study. I have a sense of what we're going to be talking about. We have headings throughout the document. The headings are easy to identify because they are in bold. And I would say that in addition to being a usability feature, this is a correctness feature as well, because you are required to have designated headings for the broader impact and intellectual merit. And so this author is clearly following those guidelines. There's no way that readers are going to miss this fact. We have a few moments where we can also think about that work of translating jargon. And so in the intellectual merit section, they say AV technology removes the ability for pedestrians to visibly communicate, i.e. eye contact with the driver. So there is no question as to what communication between the vehicle and pedestrians means. We have that spelled out for us here. And there's also a really quick definition for what they mean by a smart device. And I think both of these examples are not incredibly jargony. It's not as though someone could not understand them at all, but just a few additional words, an example here or there, really helps to ensure that no one is going to be lost as they read this. This is from a little bit further on in the same piece. And so again, we have a strategic use of headings. They've got their research objectives. And so I've got a couple of those objectives here. We're not being forced to read through that wall of text to figure out what they are. They are announcing them. And then we have a visual. And one of the most important things I think about the visual is the fact that it is large enough to read. I see a lot of reports. I see a lot of research posters that include visuals that seem like they could be very interesting, but you would really need to get out your magnifying glass or zoom if you are looking at a digital version to figure out what exactly they are representing. And so the visual needs to be large enough for your readers to access it, to make sense of it. And this is also correct because it supplies that information we would want to see. So there is a textual reference. They're alerting us to the fact that figure 1 exists. Figure 1 is located close to that textual reference. It's got a label and then a title. So all the pieces are there. So I'm about finished now. We'll end with just a brief recap of strategies and best practices. So as we started with, make sure to read any information that is given to you closely, paying attention to things like formatting guidelines, word counts, so on and so forth. You want to make sure that your research statement has a clear main idea and that you are working to support that main idea or that main claim with specific examples. And we do want the piece to feel cohesive, right? That they're all working in service of this one larger idea rather than a series of kind of disparate points. It's helpful to use what we might call signposts throughout the document, and that can take a number of different forms. That might be in the form of topic sentences. So each paragraph is going to tell us exactly what it is that we are focusing on in this section so that the reader never gets lost. You can also use descriptive headings or subheadings to do that work. And that's also useful because it kind of breaks up that wall of text feeling as well. We want to avoid jargon, ensuring that the work is intelligible for readers outside of your very specific area of expertise, right in the active voice, so that we are not sacrificing clarity or that we're not kind of getting overly wordy. seek out examples. I pulled that example we just looked at from Alex Lang's website, where he had compiled a number of successful fellowships. And so that is a resource that's out there. I'm sure the Office of Fellowships also has additional sources for you to turn to. And then finally, make sure to not skip on the proofreading process. I would say share it with trusted readers, and then definitely give yourself time to revise. And so with that, I guess I'll open it up in case there are any questions or comments.
Thank you, Lauren. That was once again a wonderful presentation. I hope folks have some questions. I think it's a good reminder to have headings and how important the headings are and labels to support the things that you're trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. They seem, like minor things, but they ultimately, I think, can have a really big impact. Mm-hmm.
Clarity. We have a question. It says, where did it go? Is there a recommendation on a good number of images to put in the personal statement proposal? Too many or too few?
I maybe have an immediate response, but then I will probably turn it over, Elizabeth, either to you or to H, because you may have better insight on this specific application. I think, there's a specific page limit and word count. And so I would definitely devote a lot of your time to the written work, right? That you want to, I think, write to that word count and take advantage of the space that you have. And so I'm sure it's possible to have too many. I guess. Do I have a specific number in mind? No, and therefore I turn it over to you for additional insight.
I don't think I've ever seen anything of that nature in the 3-page past research, personal statement, future works document, but we certainly see figures in the research statement because it's enlightening the reader. So if it's appropriate, if it adds to what you're saying, I would put them in there. I think if you look at some of the past winning applications that H has for you, as well as Alex Lang's site, you'll see how different folks have used the visuals in their actual proposal. So I would say it's discipline specific too.
And kind of going off what Elizabeth said, in terms of deciding, I would really just consider, is this something that can be communicated better with an image or with writing, and just kind of use that to guide you. Some things, as Lauren was saying, are going to be a lot easier to understand if you do have a visual. Other things, it might be taking up space that you can really explain very briefly through the text.
Another question, should the proposal have preliminary data if available, or should we focus more on visual aids? I would say if you have preliminary data, that's important to put in there. Remember, this is an assessment of you as a potential scientist, engineer. So showing through all the documents and the online application, you're trying to convey your history of thinking like a scientist, engineer. So if you have done research and you have some preliminary results that are relevant to the future, you certainly would want to include that. But you don't want to throw those in if they have no connection to the research that you're talking about in the research statement. Remember, the research statement is not something you're held to do. It is a way for you to frame out how you're thinking about potential questions you want to answer in graduate school, and you're not held to do that research. So if you've been doing a certain kind of research, you have some results and it ties to your future research, either in graduate school as somebody from going from undergrad to grad, or a graduate student, absolutely, who's done some research, you definitely would want to use that. And the visual aids are the things that support the statements that you're saying. So your visual could be results. I'll defer to Lauren and H on that one.
I think that sounds great. Yeah, I agree.
You will all be unique individual submitters based on your discipline, based on where you are in your program, based on what you've done, and how you want to show that you're prepared to do the work you want to do in graduate school.
And I'll just note, because I think usually we've had this session a few times now, and I know there's never a ton of questions, because I think it's hard to formulate those unless you're actively writing right now. So I understand if there's not a lot of questions now. My email was at the top of the slides. I think these will all be made available to you. And so if once you actually get into the process, you have questions, or want a second set of eyes on something, please feel free to reach out then, because I understand, things might come up a little further down the line.
But it's good that you're all here right now thinking about this and beginning the process.
Definitely.
That October due date comes fast. Any other questions? I mean, you certainly want to work with your faculty mentors as you write your research proposal, while keeping in mind what you just heard today, that it can't be jargon heavy. It can't be, it has to be accessible, because this is an overall assessment of you. And the way that you write when you're submitting papers for publication will be different. But in this case, you need to show that you understand the subject while making it accessible to the non-expert reader.
And just on that note, just a quick reminder, as far as getting feedback goes, definitely, as Elizabeth is saying, work with someone in your field to develop that research proposal. But once you're thinking more about, is this communicating something to somebody outside my field, you can make an appointment with me to look at your materials, make an appointment with someone at the Center for Excellence in Writing to talk over that stuff. And the same goes for those correctness issues that Lauren was talking about today. We can talk through sort of the polishing part of the document, as well as some of those visual design features as well.
All righty, well, thank you to everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Kuryloski. I always appreciate, and H appreciates, we all appreciate you talking to us about technical writing. I am always amazed at what I learn every time I hear it, and hopefully the folks on the call will feel the same way. We'll see you tomorrow. We're going to talk about broader impact, and we're going to talk to some past recipients who have the fellowship, and I think it'll be helpful to hear from them about their own journey through writing and then the benefits of having this.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Bye,
Lauren.
everybody.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.